Morning in Japan, good afternoon in Mexico. Welcome everybody to this webinar entitled Mexico, Japan and the US Relations Amid the Emerging New Normality, which is kindly sponsored by the Master Program of Global Politics and Trans-Pacific Studies, and also from the University of Guadalajara, of course, Pacific Affairs, the RIIPA. My name is Victor Kerber, and I am pleased to be the moderator of this panel. On this occasion, we have 5 distinguished fellows from the academic and private sectors. Firstly, we kindly welcome Dr. Tosh Minohara, a very well-known researcher based in the University of Kobe. Welcome, Tosh. We also feel pleased to have Mr. Masahiko Kono, who performs as the CEO of Mitsubishi Mexico. Welcome, Mr. Kono. A very dynamic and hardworking lady, Dr. Melba Falk, is also here with us, as well as Dr. Researchers of the University of Guadalajara. Welcome. And we are happy also to have Professor Kazuhiro Hayashi here with us. He is, for all sakes, researcher of the Latin America Kenkyu Center of the Kyoto University of Foreign Studies. Welcome, Professor. My only plea is to comply with the 15 minutes that you have for each presentation. If I raise this yellow card, this will mean that you only have 3 minutes left to end your presentation. So take care of your times. Now, let's begin with my precious friend, Dr. Minohara. Dr. Minohara is professor of United States, US-Japan relations at the Graduate School of Law in Kobe University, as well as chairman and executive director of the RIIPA. Go ahead, Tosh, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me? No problem?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I trust that you can see the PowerPoint that's up here. Okay, wonderful. So once again, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you today. I'd like to especially thank the faculty and staff at Guadalajara University, and special mention needs to be made to Melba for her, because when I pitched this to her, she immediately said, "It's a good idea, let's do it." So again, I tip my hat, and also to my good friend Victor for being the moderator today. So I only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to jump right. Okay, I think I was on mute. Okay, all right.
Yeah. Can you also please share your presentation?
I think I am. No.
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 Can you try again? I can't see it. Ah, there you go.
All right, so let's go back one then. All right, so was I like on mute for the past several minutes?
No, just a few seconds.
Oh wow, so then it went on automatically. Okay, so this is okay. This is the cover page. I'm going to jump right in of how I see international relations. So I mean, of course, COVID is a big deal, but I think China is the bigger deal when it comes to long-term international relations. And you have to make the connection between COVID and China, because I think COVID really showed to us the true nature of China. I mean, China is now saying, well, it wasn't our disease to begin with, but that the world needs to thank China for what it's done and whatnot. And I think a lot of people now see China for what it is. It's a country that definitely does not share values with us. Now, global tectonics always shifts. We know this. I like to refer to the day of Spain as Pax España. But then the baton was passed to Britain, Pax Britannica, and then of course we have Pax Britannica. But IR always shifts. There is a tectonics that takes place, and hegemonic shifts occur, and history is also never static. And of course, this is all, we all know this. But right now, I think is a defining moment because we're living in a world of waning US global leadership. Also, perhaps you can make a strong argument that there is a relative decline of American influence. When I do webinars with Europe, what strikes me most is that many young Europeans no longer see America as a country that is to be emulated, that they don't see America as something as a beacon of hope. It's the absolute opposite. And perhaps this is true with my audience here in Mexico. So I guess the way we view America has changed as well. And the American response to COVID, and especially the response by the American leader, Donald Trump, I think has really brought out the worst of America. I mean, it's an America that we knew existed, but now it's very visible front and center. What makes the world even crazier now is that we live in a world where we have two despots who want to outdo their past, you know, their greatest dictators. So in Xi's case, he wants to surpass Mao, which is very scary because Mao was a tremendous dictator. I mean, he was a terrible dictator. And then we have Putin who wants to surpass Stalin. So this, I think, you know, are troubling moments for us. Right here, these are wild times. We also need to acknowledge that China has become a great power, and thus it will act as such and expect to be treated as such. Okay, as a great power, China wants to change the norms, right? It wants to establish new norms so that it better suits its national interests. And I think the Chinese believe that because it's a great power, that the other nations need to acknowledge this and accommodate China's new global position. That to make, you know, China deserves growing space because it is a large power. And the COVID has opened a window of opportunity which China feels that it must capitalize on, because America is not showing any leadership at all. And another thing to keep in mind is China will be the only major economy that will be growing this year, you know, albeit at a much, much slower rate. The rest of the world, all G7 nations will be, you know, in the negative. So, I mean, this is something that China is cognizant of. And I think it sees an opportunity to create couplings where other nations will be dependent on China for their own economic recovery. And you already see this from the comments by Japan's new Prime Minister, Suga, who has said that he is not going to encircle China, he is not going to alienate China. And I think it's because he realizes that Japan needs China for its own economic recovery. Now, the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that Xi is a dictator. And as a dictator, he needs to be very wary of what his public feels. And right now, because of the growth rate that has slowed down, there's discontent. And so I think when your public is discontent and you're a dictator, what tool do you use? Well, I think you use nationalism. And one of the best ways to stoke nationalism is to take a hard line on external issues. And I think Hong Kong was a good indicator of this, South China Sea, and India most recently. You know, and the Chinese, when you talk to the average Chinese, you know, they're very proud of what China is doing. You know, it's just the chest thumping moment. I think at the moment, China does not seek to create a Sino-centric world order. This could, of course, change. So it is not seeking a Pax Sinica at this moment, but it does want to establish a sphere of influence that is free of US interference. Again, this has a historical analogy. I think we need to understand that Japan was a challenger to the established hegemony back in the 1930s. The Japanese called it back then the Asian Monroe Doctrine. I think this is what the Chinese want. They want an Asian Monroe Doctrine redux. The Japanese also had the New Order for East Asia, which later became the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. And this is, I think this is China's ambition of creating its own sphere of influence, and also the Belt and Road Initiative, I think, really corresponds or resonates with the New Order for East Asia in the 1930s. The New Order for East Asia was the order with Japan at the center in East Asia, China just wants to be, wants to replace the previous Japan with itself. And I think a line will be based on values. I believe in the coming, well, next year, perhaps, China will be labeled in the United States as more than just an unfair player. America will start to vilify China. Remember when Reagan said, the Soviet Union was the evil empire? I think this is, the moment where America really takes its threat seriously. I also think that because of this instability in the global order, that the chances of stumbling into a major conflict will increase dramatically. Lines will be drawn. In the Cold War, there was CHINCOM, COCOM, and whatnot. And there will be, because lines will be drawn, I think you will see one camp. I see this camp as China, Russia, Iran, DPRK, Syria, Venezuela, Cuba, and so on. It'll be us versus them is the thing. And there are geopolitical, the geopolitical flashpoints do have historical analogies. And so, I was just writing this book chapter of Japan in the 1920s. And, in the 1920s, many Americans referred to Japan as the Prussia of the East, that it wasn't behaving, it was ambitious, it was growing. And I'm thinking, well, maybe China is now the Third Reich of the East, that it is this ambitious power that seeks to set forth a different set of values. We're brief on time, but I just want to highlight the 4 flashpoints. One is, of course, South China Sea and Hong Kong. I'm not going to delve into this because it's game over. China has successfully created a new status quo. So this is very similar to how Japan changed the status quo in Manchuria in the 1930s, or Hitler's Germany changed the status quo in Sudetenland. And did the world respond? No, the world did not respond. And that's exactly what we're doing today. India, Vietnam could be other flashpoints, but most likely this will be a wait and see attitude with the United States, with limited assistance provided, if any. But from number 3, things change. Senkakus and the Penghu Islands. The Penghu Islands are the islands between mainland China and Taiwan. I think this will lead to strong economic reprisals, freezing of assets, embargoes. Just much like when Japan went into southern Indochina in the late 1930s, there was rapid response by the Americans. We'll see something like that, I believe. Now, the most important geopolitical issue would be, of course, Okinawa and Taiwan. Okinawa would obviously mean immediate war with the United States because there is the U.S.-Japan alliance. Taiwan, I still think, and there are scholars who would disagree with me, but I think it's a definite casus belli. I think it's very similar to the invasion of Poland, where that was the last straw. When Hitler went into Poland, France and Britain did not stand idly by. And I guess the similarity is that there were no British troops or French troops on Polish soil. There are no American or Allied forces troops in Taiwan. And so I think that's why that creates some ambiguity. But I believe that there is, I don't see a situation where the United States would not act. Okay. And another thing is to keep in mind is that the sparring match between China and the United States is no longer a sparring match. I believe the boxing match has started. And the first bell, or the bell of round 1, rang in July with the 2 statements by Pence. And those are very, very powerful statements. And I believe the new Cold War has started. Now, a lot of people in Japan, I don't know about Mexico, are throwing around the term new Cold War. But I would like to remind the audience today that this terminology is very much a North American European concept, because the Cold War was hot in Asia. You had the Korean War, you had the Vietnam War, so, okay. Now I'm gonna jump right into the elections. Who will emerge victorious for 2020? I mean, the magical number is 270, Electoral College. Well, current polls show that Biden is leading with a comfortable margin, all right? So normally you would think that he's gonna win. And plus, the incumbent, Donald Trump trailing this much in mid-September, this is bad news. Economy tanking. I mean, it's just hard to see Trump winning. But then again, Trump is Trump. He's no ordinary person. I mean, I like to call him Teflon Don. This guy is, he's just extraordinary. Uh, so it's really hard to say at this point. Also for Biden, just winning is not enough. He needs to win big because Trump will not concede if it is a close election. Other good news for Biden is that he's outspending Trump by a wide margin. And also the Never Trump movement. These are former traditional Republicans. Their movement on the ground is finally gaining steam. And they're actually working at the state level so that Republican senators who support Trump will actually lose. That being said, you may disagree with me, but I don't see Biden as being a strong, dashing, or charismatic leader. He's not overflowing with vigor, right? He always stumbles with his words. But also, he's not despised or divisive like Hillary Clinton. Okay, so this is a good thing. But then you could also argue that he has no hardcore supporters like Trump. There's no 40%, the 40% that will support you no matter what. So in this regard, Trump and Sanders are very similar. They have either you love him or you hate him. Biden, for better or for worse, he's in the middle. Okay, and this is probably a culmination of his age. He'll be 78 in November. And being in the middle of the political spectrum, makes him really, I could say you could say he's not controversial, but yet he doesn't really stoke intense emotions, either for or against. We also need to be aware of an October surprise. I would be prepared. I think we should be prepared for some sort of crisis, either domestically, externally. Right? You might start at worth around. We got 3 minutes, right? 3 minutos. Yeah.
Right.
And also be prepared for a contested and messy post-election result. Okay, and the big question, this is the American democracy that we're talking about. Will a peaceful transition of power be possible, right? Okay, and this is my final slide, so I'm gonna use my 3 minutes on this. The map that you see on the left is what happened in 2016. As you can see it's mostly red. And it was a blowout in the Electoral College, although in the popular vote, Hillary got 3 million votes more. So you always thought that democracy was about the majority winning, but in the American presidential election, that is not the case. And a lot of the stuff you probably already know. It's on the column to your right. Voter turnout will be all important. Okay, people will need to come out to vote. I watched the U.S. news today. Early polling looks good. People are out there, they're voting. The question is, will mail-in ballots be counted? By the way, I received my ballot for the first time via email. States are reacting to this pandemic. Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, will definitely be key to this election. Okay, the 20 electoral votes. I think this could be the clincher. So when you are watching TV come November, please see what happens to Pennsylvania. The two states that are set to be a toss-up, Florida and Texas, I give to Trump. Now, because Hispanics support Biden, but I think Latinos in Florida are completely different because for them it's about Cuba, relations with Cuba, right? So I think, and the race is so tight, any small group that votes overwhelmingly for one candidate could tip the scales, and I think that's why Florida will go. So will Iowa and Ohio. But on the other hand, this is good for Biden. I believe that Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Arizona will go to Biden. These are all critical swing states. But again, we need to also not just pay attention to congressional elections, the presidential elections. The congressional elections are also very important. This could actually go to the Democrats. Okay, 35 seats are up for elections, which 23 the GOP need to defend. The Dems need either just 3 or 4. Right now, it seems like they actually may gain 3. All right. So, and then the House, the Dems won really big in the midterms. They'll probably lose a few seats, but they'll still clinch. They'll still hold on to the 218, which is the majority. So even if Trump wins, if he loses Congress, things could go very bad for him. There could be a second impeachment, could be very, very possible. So with that, I think my time is up.
That's right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you, Tosh.
Okay. Thank you.
You have raised very interesting questions and topics.
Yeah,
I hope we have time enough at the end of this presentation.
Okay, sure.
So that we can have some questions by the public. Well, now I will give the floor to Mr. Masahiko Kono. He belongs to the business sector. To be precise, he's the CEO of Mitsubishi Mexico, who will talk on this occasion about Mexico and Japan economic relations before and after the terrible COVID-19 pandemic. Are there any significant changes on that regard, Mr. Kono? Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for kind introduction. And can you listen clearly?
I can hear you.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can.
Okay, first of all, I would like to thank for every participant and friends from Japan and also Guadalajara University. And I also would like to say thank you very much for Professor Minohara and also Professor Victor Kerber for giving me this excellent opportunity to participate in the web seminar tonight. And also Chris, thank you very much for your support and friendship organizing this event very well. I'm very glad to discuss very broader and important challenges for the multiple aspects of Mexico, Japan, and United States, geopolitics, economy, business, culture of the trilateral relations before and after or with COVID-19. Those difficult challenges caused by this pandemic started in China may continue global basis for many, many years. Even if we have a vaccine for early next year, keeping in the first page, that causes significant damage on society and the economy for all the countries. Through this pandemic, we can see more clearly what is a political and social problem. And also in business area, unfortunately, weaker company or enterprise who has fundamental problem or wrong business strategy, they could not survive in this difficult environment. But I think Mexico, Japan have many opportunities to trust and support each other in society and economy, and also business and cultures. After Professor Minohara's very dynamic and insightful talks on geopolitical and security aspect, I would like to focus on the economic aspect based on my business experience in Japan, United States, and Mexico. I hope my 15-minute speech will be beneficial especially for younger leaders in both academia and business sectors. Because I always believe we have to study history very carefully and learn a lot how our predecessors in each country made serious mistake or overcame similar challenges for our nation or commercial enterprise. Likewise, tonight participants at this webinar who may have very strong passion and great enthusiasm to contribute our nation and the international relationship could learn about our history and become more agile and also creative for the future prosperity of our nation and sustainable partnership with Mexico, Japan, and the United States. So Chris, could you move to second page? This is just describing a panoramic picture of economic relationship among Mexico, Japan, United States, as well as China. Due to the pandemic, this year, 2020 GDP of Mexico, US, and Japan are significantly decreasing. However, China recovered quickly from pandemic, and economic impact is much, much smaller than our countries. As for first half of this year, trade volume between all countries significantly decrease. And also, I think it takes longer time to recover. And also, it is obvious US and China have strongest political and economic and military power as #1 and #2 GDP country. At the same time, those two countries are largest marketplace and also strongest innovation center in the world. However, due to the conflict of the ideology and national interest, US and China could not build trusting partnership at all. In contrary, Mexico and Japan have shared a rich history of over 400 years, and also we trusted each other. We also have many commonalities such as culture, tradition, food, in addition to great business and trade relation. And we are very closer and also strategic location to the big countries. And both countries have a strong partnership with the US. Mexico and Japan has a similar population size. And for own economic growth, our two countries have to export competitive products and services to big country and other region. Japan has diversified supply chain in Asian region too. And Japan also have invested a lot in Mexico for electronic, automobile, and also contributed your growth and employment in Mexico by exporting high quality product for US, as also supplying an important customer in Mexico. Before and after pandemic, President Trump has been focusing on trade war with China, and national security and technology dispute continue for years. And also trade volume between US and China has been declined since 2018. With COVID-19, US and China business become more and more difficult, and investment between US and China are slowing down. Because the US and China dispute and the pandemic continue for years, I think Mexico will be able to lead a very important role to diversify global supply chain of various products and services from automobile to medical and consumers. I believe there are more areas Mexico and Japan can work together for our new challenges with COVID-19. Please, could you move to next chart? Let's focus on Mexico and Japan economic history and partnership. As the upper right of this chart shows, we could see 4 main points of trade history between Mexico and Japan. First, 2005 Mexico-Japan EPA Economic Partnership Agreement became a big trigger to expand the trade volume. However, in year 2009, export and import reduced after the 2008 global financial crisis. Import from Japan is mostly automobile and related component and remained flat after 2016 US presidential election and USMCA negotiation. Japanese companies have to wait and see its result and impact. Export from Mexico to Japan steadily increased after 2005 EPA, pork, copper concentrate, electronics, avocado are main product from Mexico. As lower left of this chart also show, Japanese company and residents in Mexico doubled in recent 10 years. Japanese automobile industry has significant contribution to production, export to US, and also sales to in Mexico, like 30 to 40% market share were maintained. Since most of the Japanese company invested through US subsidiary to Mexico, actual Japanese investment to Mexico is much larger than this FDI, foreign direct investment number from Japan for past 10 years in this chart. And also all project has very successful track record. In addition to automobile, Japanese electric company had been established on factory and export electric product to US, Japan, and other countries. And also Japanese company have been working on clean and competitive energy generation, such as wind and solar power site across your country. Japanese company also invested infrastructure, mining, medical, food, consumer, and digital service segment in Mexico and described in this chart. Approximately 20 to 70,000 Mexican citizens of Japanese origin, we call Nikkei, after generation of the immigrants, established a core foundation in Mexico. Like a common understanding, Japanese are very hard worker, friendly and honestly, and transparent, and amigos amigas working together with Mexico in both business and cultures. So please move to next chart. As a final step, I would like to focus on challenges of Mexico or Japan after or with COVID-19. Before COVID-19, Mexico has long-standing challenges for years, such as social and economic gaps, large informal economy, unhealthy eating and soft drink habit, and also security and criminal problems. Mexican government policy changes since late 2018 caused much more caution from the foreign investors. Legal and institutional framework in Mexico could support or damage long-term commitment from the foreign companies, such as changes to the existing commercial agreement, setback of the energy reform, strong opposition by local communities. After or with COVID-19, negative economic growth continued for years, and informal economy and employment would be damaged seriously. Government tax revenue declined for a long time, but the need to much higher expenditure to support people in daily living, medical care, supplying vaccine for the old people with very low price. We also realized some critical products such as medical care supply, test kits, ventilator, medicine, vaccine for COVID-19. Each nation could not rely on only global supply chain, and we need to build up own national production capability and technology.
3 more minutes, please.
Okay. With COVID-19, our business activity and also consumer behavior had been fundamentally changed, such as minimum contact with other people and remotely monitor health and daily activity with digital technology. Real store or restaurant could not maintain its existing capacity. On the other hand, e-commerce, online digital service, and smart logistics become more common and competitive with higher quality and lower prices. Having a many commonalities and successful track record between Mexico and Japan, I believe we have many potential collaboration areas in era with COVID-19. First, jointly provide competitive products and innovation digital solutions with contactless. For example, electric vehicle, hydrogen solution, medical, health, food, healthy food, attractive fashion, culture, education, and entertainment. ESG, environment, social, and governance become more important. Japan will be able to support Mexico in technology and actual experience, such as renewable energy, CO2 reduction, solution for air and water pollution, new material, and eco-friendly plastic. To complement the regional supply chain, we could work together to establish strategic and sustainable production capacities in each region in America and Asia. Government and private dialogue shall explore more and more to solve social and economic challenges. And then finally, and most important, the soft power, political value, diplomatic network, education and cultures and foundation of our two nations. We should utilize our software to bridge the physical distance and strengthen economic and business relations between two countries. We in our two countries face very difficult challenges, but I believe Mexico, Japan, and US trilateral partnership could overcome those challenges. Key is how we could trust each other and explore government and private dialogue and become very agile and innovative with technology and business solution. Thank you very much for attention. I'm looking forward to having a Q&A session later.
Thank you, Mr. Kono. What I feel is that somehow you are optimistic about Mexico-Japan relations, at least in the business sector,
Yes.
which is very good. Okay, now it's the turn for Dr. Melba Falk, whom I personally admire and appreciate. She will offer us an overview of Mexican-Japanese relations under the newest commercial frame called USMECA, or in Spanish, we call it TMEC. So it's your turn, Dr. Melba Falk, please. Is she there? Melba? I don't see
Good
her.
afternoon, Mexico.
sorry.
Good morning, Japan. I am very glad to share this panel with such important persons, Dr. Minohara, Mr. Kono, Mr. Hayashi, Professor Collignon, and Dr. Kerber. Since we have limited time, I am going to start my presentation. Just a moment, please. Okay. Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened here. Okay, I will start with this. I don't know what happened with my presentation. Mexico is becoming a very important country in the international economy, and is now the 12th exporter and the 12th importer in the world. We are the 4th exporter in automobiles and the 6th producer in the world. So it is very important, the relationship that we do have with Japan. And I don't know what happened with my other, okay, I'm sorry. I had a previous slide, I don't know where it is. And so when we look at the economic relationship between Japan and Mexico, we have to see it on a global perspective, from a global approach, not the bilateral approach. And how we can do that? Well, Mexico has right now a big surplus with North America, especially with the US, and we do have a deficit with Asia and Europe. So in those two trade balances, Japan has an important role to play in Mexico. On the one hand, in the surplus with the US, Japan participates with our exports, especially in the transport equipment sectors, vehicles, and also parts and components. And on the other hand, in the deficit that we do have with Asia, Japan has a participation because we do have a lot of Japanese affiliates operating in Mexico, about 1,200. And those Japanese affiliates operating in Mexico import parts and components from not only Japan, but also from other affiliates located, Japanese affiliates located in Asia. For example, Nissan Mexico can be importing parts and components from Nissan Japan. So, Nissan China, I mean. So Japan in the whole relationships of Mexico in the global economy has two roles, is playing two roles. One, promoting exports, especially participating in our exports to the US, which is our main market. We export to the US around 75% of our exports. And also Japan is participating in our deficit with Asia. And right now, both the new rules in UNSCA and also the COVID will have an impact on that. Well, the second important aspect of our economic relationship with Japan is foreign direct investment. As Mr. Kono said, this investment has increased, especially since we signed the agreement with Japan in 2004. And right now, we have received, as has been announced by the Japanese companies, from 2003 to 2019, $30 billion of investment in Mexico. Of those, 83% goes to manufacture and 60% to the transport equipment sector. Of that kind of investment, 540 projects are especially in the transport equipment sector, and the companies have announced also the creation of 155,000 jobs that represent right now around 66% of the employment on the TE sector. So Japan is having an important impact, not only in our exports, but also on employment and also in the economies of the local states that are hosting the Japanese investment. I don't know what is happening to this. Okay. This is the graph that I just explained. This is our surplus with the US. This is our deficit with Asia and Japan's role in both sectors. And so, Japanese FDI is concentrated mainly in the Bajío region and also in northern states of Mexico, and mainly on, they have contributed to conform the hub centers in those two regions. We have already 1,200 Japanese affiliates operating in Mexico. And so, this investment that has come to Mexico is closely related to our, as I explained, to our trade flows, and Japan has contributed to promote a network production in North America, and also for Mexico to participate in the global value chains. And here we do have these bubbles represent the size of each economy. Here is Mexico, and I have taken just North America and Asia in this graph to see what is the role of Japan. Japan has already 26,000 affiliates in the world. Of those, 7,000 are in Asia. And here we have to look that recently, before COVID-19, Japanese affiliates were moving from China to Asia because of the trade frictions between China and the US. So Japanese affiliates in Asian countries have increased in the last years. Then China has like 7,000 Japanese affiliates operating in China, and in the rest of Asia, like more than 2,000. What about America, North America? We do have 1,200 Japanese affiliates in Mexico, and there are more than 3,000 Japanese affiliates in North America, mainly on the US. So these Japanese affiliates operating in this networked production influence our trade flows with the US. And the width of these arrows represent the volume, the value of our trade. Our main partner is the US, and we export more to the US than we import from the US. So the US has a deficit with us, and here we have the same thing for Japan and with China. We do have a global trade with China greater than Japan, but this trade here that we do with China, it can be influenced by the Japanese affiliates operating in China. So that's how we do have this networked production, and Mexico is actively participating in global value chains, and Japan is having a role on that. Right now, at this time, about 50% of trade is done by global value chains. And these are characterized by complex activities. That means that a good that is exported from Mexico to the US can cross the border several times. That means those are complex activities. Then we do have backward and forward linkages, and this is the result of the fragmentation of production, because right now final goods are produced in different plants around the world, and that's why trade in intermediate goods have increased. So with the new COVID, global value chains have been disrupted. Also, US-China trade frictions are affecting these kind of flows. And Japan has responded with a stimulus package, because the first disruption started in China, and so many plants has to stop production because China stopped sending intermediate goods. So Japan responded with a stimulus package to relocate to Japan or to Asia or to Mexico Japanese affiliates that are operating in China, and that they are looking for lesser risk disruption, for diversity of supply, and to make global value chains, Japanese affiliates, more resilient. So Mexico can benefit now with UMSCA, and I will go after the next slide, because we can have more Japanese affiliates coming into Mexico from China, for example. And or Japanese affiliates already operating in Mexico can increase their production. And so here is just to see how intermediate goods in the transport equipment sector by regions, and we can see here that intermediate goods, that means parts and components, the US used to be the provider of 80% of our parts and components in that sector, and right now it has fallen to 60%. And Asian countries have compensated this loss from the US. And so important to notice that in the transport equipment sector, the share of intermediate inputs embodied in exports from Mexico is 85%. And foreign value added content in our exports in the transport equipment sector is 48%. So we need to increase this value added locally, domestically, in our exports. And so this is our surplus with NAFTA and in intermediate goods, and this is our surplus in final goods, these parts and components, and these are automobiles. And so the new normal, UMSCA will promote new rules, and also COVID-19 and US trade US-China trade difference will be affecting this kind of results in trade. And here, I have taken by the Transportation Secretary of the US, they do have information about the different brands with different models being assembled in Mexico and in the US. And I have taken just the Japanese brands. Right now, 19 models, this is the figures for 2019, 19 models are being assembled in Mexico, Japanese models. And local content right now is for 52% of the models, they have a local content less than 50%. And for 48 of the models, they have a local content between 65 and 70%. Why is this important? Because UMSCA right now has changed the rules of origin. That will be a major impact on the transport equipment sector. Now, vehicles have to have, right before UMSCA, 62.5% of local content, regional content. But right now, that is increasing to 75%. That will be the requirement for the next 3 years. And also, UMSCA is changing the rules in the labor standards. Now, UMSCA is requiring that 40% of this 75% comes from a value generated in activities that are paying laborers $16 per hour.
3 minutes left.
Okay, and so I just want to point out that if we take in these 19 models the regional content, we see that 33% of these models have 60% of regional content versus the 75. And 65% of, 33% of the models have 65% of regional content, and another third have 70 to 80% of regional content. Okay. And so we have to go right now in the transport equipment sector, the sector pays 13% above the average salary in 6 industries. But right now, some companies like Eihin that produces parts for Honda and Piolax have declared that they do prefer to increase their wages than to move production to the US because that will be more costly and because Japanese production is very efficient in Mexico. And so this is the structure. I am not going to go through this, I'm sorry. But one of the main challenges of the transport equipment sector, besides UMSCA and COVID, is how to incorporate our small and medium enterprises into regional chains of production. And here, as Mr. Kono was saying, Japan can play an important role through the activities of JICA and JETRO. And I will skip this one. And so go to conclusions. Japanese FDI in the tea sector of Mexico has made important impact on trade, employment, and GDP growth in hosted states. The patterns of exports and imports in the transport equipment sector, intermediate goods, are indicative of the regional network of production in NAFTA, where Japanese affiliates operate in the region. New UMSCA imposes stricter rules of origin and labor standards, and that will probably induce more Japanese suppliers to establish in Mexico and or increase endogenous local suppliers. That's a big challenge for Mexico. And so the challenges is relocation that could favor Mexico, new trade protectionism is increasing a lot of uncertainty in an otherwise well-functioning network system. And another challenge is to develop domestically Mexican suppliers. And then the new CPTPP is a step in the right direction and is offering Mexico, where Japan it is a member, diversification from the US market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melba. Well, we have Professor Kazuhiro Hayashi, who is from the Kyoto University of Foreign Studies. He will touch upon the automotive industry and the Japanese community at the Bajío region. For those of you who do not know what the Bajío region is, this is the main setting of Japanese investments in the mid of Mexico, the geography of Mexico. So please, Professor Hayashi, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good evening. I'm speaking from Nagoya, Aichi Prefecture, where the headquarters of Toyota Motor is located. And this time I have just came back from Mexico, Mexico City, after 3 years of stay. So 2 years in León, Guanajuato, working in Lagos de Moreno, Jalisco, and later 1 year in Mexico City. So before starting the discussion about the Japanese culture or Mexican culture, I'd like to analyze the detail because it's very difficult to define the cultures. Because there are obviously, for example, Mexican culture, there are some variations such as gender or such as class, education, etc. So probably for the company, Japanese company, its most important task, most difficult task is human resources management. Currently, I wanted to use the title of a researcher at University of Foreign Studies of Kyoto, because simply this year, Guadalajara and Kyoto are celebrating the 40th years of anniversary of sister cities. So I wanted to use that title. However, I belong to the Japanese private companies here in Nagoya. So this time, other people talked about the industry, Japanese industry situation from economic and political perspective. So I'd like to talk about the theme from cultural perspective. Before I entered the Japanese private companies, I was studying at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, and later I worked as a researcher of Secretary Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan. So normally I speak about the Latin American politics or Mexican industry or UMSCA also, NAFTA. However, this time I'd like to talk about the ethnographic research in Lagos de Moreno, especially of Jalisco State, based on my experience of stay, because I went to Jalisco State, Lagos de Moreno, for starting up a new factory. So I stayed in Jalisco for 2 years. I had many opportunities to visit Guadalajara, Jalisco for some procedures. So I visited frequently Desarrollo Social, entre otros. This time I'd like to talk about the cultural perspective of Bajío current situation. By the way, yesterday I have finished to write an article on the violence and its impact on Japanese community in Bajío region. Mr. Kono also mentioned about the violence, organized crime in Bajío region. It's very complicated these years. I think these years, 10 years, because of the presence of organized crime, especially narco traffic cartels. So that is something to do with the Japanese family, for example, structure, expatriates from Japan. For example, currently, the situation of Baguio is very dangerous. Last year, December of 1919, finally, Ministry of Foreign Affairs decided to raise the safety level from zero to 1 for the first time because of the gun attack to a Japanese expatriate. So the Consulate General of Leon of Japan in Leon didn't want to raise that security level. However, finally they decided because they are very worried about the current situation. So nowadays, many Japanese companies didn't want to send expatriates to Mexico because of the security problem. Obviously, as Dr. Melba mentioned, there are some reasons, such as renegotiation of NAFTA or US-China trade war, or COVID-19 also. So in that sense, there are less Japanese, especially many Japanese doesn't want to bring their family to Mexico currently. So, but this is a kind of opportunity probably for Mexican, especially for Mexicans who have the knowledge about the Japanese language or Japanese culture, because there appear the very unique job position, such as interpreter or translator inside the company. This is very unique. Why I'm mentioning about this job position? Because there is a great difference between Japanese companies in Baguio region and Japanese companies in Mexico City. There is a big difference. So in Mexico City, you hardly find interpreter or translator as a job position at the company, Japanese companies, because normally the majority can speak English or can speak only English. So for example, in my case, I speak Spanish, but at the meeting at the company, for example, my boss can speak only English. So I have to speak in English in order to avoid double efforts. However, the case of companies in Baguio region is totally different. As you may know, probably you have visited some industrial park. There are factories. So Japanese, especially the Japanese expatriates, obviously from Japan, from Japanese mother factory, they are engineer, the majority. For example, in my case, when I went to Lagos de Moreno to start up the factory, my colleagues, Japanese colleagues who went to Lagos de Moreno with me, they didn't speak neither Spanish nor English. So one day, something very funny happened. My boss asked me, please call a taxi for me, because I want to go to the shopping center. I called the taxi, and the taxi is outside the apartment. So I told my boss, the taxi is over there. You can go to the shopping mall. So my boss told me, you don't go with me? He asked me, because I can go with this taxi. However, I can not come back to the home without you. So this is the very, very funny situation in Baguio currently. So they have never lived outside the country. They are engineer only inside the factory in Japan. They were checking their machines or their products or quality assurance. So they are not accustomed to that kind of cultures. So very different from that of Japanese companies in Mexico City. So in that sense, it's very difficult. For example, if you want to compare these two cultures, Mexican cultures or Japanese cultures, we have to ask which Japanese culture you are talking about, because there are great difference between two companies. Obviously, inside the company, there are big difference also. Especially in Mexico City, there are headquarter or sales office of the company. In Bajío region, engineers, factories. So the problem is very unique, the language barrier or cultural barriers. So when we go to Mexico, normally the company gave us or gives us this kind of guidebook. Before going to do business in Mexico, you have to read this kind of introduction for investment, M&A, CSR, accounting. However, if I arrive to Guadalajara, for example, Lagos de Moreno, you will notice that the problem is not that. Especially the problem is the human resources, management of human resources, and some procedures with government. So it's very totally different. But I'm not talking about the differences between only Japanese. Obviously, inside Mexican, there are some differences as well. For example, as I mentioned, the social class, education, ethnicity, or gender. There are very big, probably problems. Because when I opened the factory, I checked more than 500 CVs, curriculum vitae. Okay, thank you. There are big difference. For example, there are some licenciados. It's sometimes very difficult to treat that kind of people. For example, we Japanese are very accustomed with the clean up the room or where we use the factory. When we ask the licenciados who have the degree in accounting or human resourcing, something like that, they say, no, I don't like that. No me titulé para eso. I didn't pay a high tuition for the university to clean up my office. This is a big problem. So my boss especially was fighting every day with the Mexican licenciados in this case. It's very difficult. And at the same time, for example, in the factory, you will see some employees, operadoras inside the factory. Every operators in our factory were single mother. And they obviously, they don't have any title of university, high school, nor probably junior high school. So in that sense, when we talk about Mexican culture, or when we bring this kind of guide, we cannot sometimes do well the business in Mexico. Yeah, at the same time, there are a mixture of many cultures. As I mentioned, there are opportunities for interpreters or translators at our factory, also our industrial park in Bajío also. There are many Nikkeis, Japanese Nikkeis. Have you heard about that? Nikkei Japanese descendant. So from Peru, from Bolivia, from Mexico, because obviously they speak perfectly Spanish and Japanese, English also. So there are a mixture of cultures. So it's very difficult to say what is a Japanese culture. Obviously the region also. For example, when you go to Salamanca, you can enjoy very well the food of Hiroshima, because there is a factory of Mazda. So very curious thing. So when you talk about the Japanese automotive industries, you can observe many cultural aspects also, and probably knowing that you can do many business. I remember very well. Okay. Para los estudiantes mexicanos, últimamente quisiera decir una cosa. Yo he trabajado e investigado sobre todo acerca de industria automotriz, TEMEC, entre otros temas, ¿no? La política de AMLO. En ese sentido, sobre todo los estudiantes interesados en la cultura, economía, política de Japón, con mucho gusto, con confianza me pueden escribir. Los doctores tienen mis contactos. Estoy muy feliz. Tal vez gracias a COVID estoy aquí. Nunca me imaginé que puedo participar. Iba a participar en este tipo de reunión desde Japón. I'm very happy with you sharing the time. My wife, my son are Mexican. And I'm very happy with you. And I'm very happy sharing time with a Mexican student. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's a very good chance for Mexican students. Last but not least, of course, I will cede the floor to Dr. Cristobal Collignon. He recently obtained his PhD from the University of Colima. Congratulations, Dr. Collignon.
Thank you very much. I'm still getting used to the whole doctor thing. It's very interesting, very new for me. I'll be sharing my slides. Can someone just confirm if you can see it? It's okay? Okay. So thank you. Thank you all for being with us today. Today I will make a presentation of one of my topics. Then precisely due to my PhD, I was remembering with a lot of fondness and of my time as a guest researcher at the Kanda Gaikokugo Daigaku in Chiba. And when I was doing some research there, I was focusing on Mexican public diplomacy and especially cultural diplomacy. And for what I observe now in this COVID-19 world and this new normal, this is a very interesting topic to go back a little bit and to make some adjustments, maybe try to get closer to this idea again. And I will be presenting it to you from the lenses of the international relations theoretical frame. Okay. I would like to, of course, thank our partners from the RIPA, Professor Toshimi Nohara, from Mitsubishi Corporation, Professor Kono, and my colleagues and Professor Hayashi, who is now in the Kyoto Gaikokugo Daigaku. And now I will continue with my presentation. What are we talking about with this? There is a phrase that I really like to remember from Octavio Paz, a Nobel laureate, and he was a diplomat as well from Mexico. And he said, of course, he wrote in Spanish, la primera impresión que produce cualquier contacto, aún en el más distraído y casual, con la cultura del Japón es la extrañeza. And this translates to the first impression that a contact with the culture of Japan produces, even the most distracted and casual, is puzzlement. And that is still very true in some ways, but now with the new ways that communications have been developing and the new web society that we have been watching grow and especially flourish during these days of the pandemics, it makes me wonder again, what do the Japanese and the Mexicans think of each other, for example, or what do we do to produce that impression. And of course, that brings me back to my research on cultural diplomacy. And the question is, how do we do cultural diplomacy? Okay, and sometimes we would like to consider it something deeper. Okay, but let's go to a more personal level where you are right now from your seat at home, and just think about these long months that we have been confined at home. So human creativity, beyond any cheesy description or romanticized view, it's what has kept us alive and mostly sane during these COVID times. And imagine your long months of quarantine without products of the arts like cinema, books, TV series, music. If there's something with the COVID, is then we have remembered something during these very long days. And isn't we are more aware and avid of experiencing products born of human creativity. And this human creativity is just huge, and it's so diverse, and the possibilities in diplomatic exchanges from cultural diplomacy between Mexico and Japan are vast, really, really vast. Okay, and of course, during these days of confinement and taking social distance and trying to stay home, this is actually a huge boon to a traditional area of opportunity of diplomacy that has been on and off in the Mexican agenda, but it has had a continuation in the Japanese agenda for foreign affairs. And we like to think normally when we see from the embassies or these organs that produce the cultural diplomacy, we like to think of something like this. We like to think about the work of Frida Kahlo or Hokusai, and we like to think that how elegant this kind of fine arts are and how they are supposed to be showcased at every given moment, right? And you can see this until, I don't know, every time in the US, whenever you go to the Mexican Cultural Center, Cultural Institute at the Washington, D.C., you will always have a Frida Kahlo exposition. And if you go wherever for a Japanese culture institute, you will have some hokusai hanging over there, right? With some alterations or with some commentary. But reality is that publics in both countries have been receiving something a little bit different, okay? They have been receiving a lot of popular culture lately. And by lately, I mean several years by now. And then there has been some adaptations. There has been some different ways of portraying it. But the main consumers of this game has become the new workers, the new lines of workers, and the new voters, for example. And one of the main stances of public diplomacy is that you want these possible new voters to vote for a political agenda that is close to your ideals, right? So Japan has been making a lot of effort since the 80s, putting a lot on the Cool Japan project, and then the Odoroku Japan project, and then the Visit Japan project. And sadly, none of these images come from an real organized Mexican proposition that has had a long-standing public diplomacy approach. For what the Japanese youth have seen or have appreciated is something that comes from another country, from another filter. And in this case, you can see the picture here from Disney company, from Pixar, that takes a very traditional Mexican day, which is the Day of the Dead, a festivity, and it's transformed into a picture, very colorful. It was very successful, and it was not Mexican. Of course, it was about Mexican culture, but it's not Mexican, okay? And very often we see in some portrayals of Mexican traditional culture, for example, we have this Aztec god called Quetzalcoatl being adapted into Japanese anime. And by this adaptation, we can see that there is, of course, some attraction to the Mexican aesthetics or the Mexican historical backgrounds, but at the same time, it's going through the Japanese filter. It doesn't go directly from Mexico to Japan. So COVID-19 has posed a very interesting situation in which Mexico has not already been doing it, but I will present some examples than Mexico pushing further cultural diplomacy. So this is what the young people see today, okay? They play video games, they watch anime, see movies, play cell phone games, and they are very close to the culture. And it becomes part of their reality, because that is something that Japanese culture is very interestingly doing as their part of their public agenda, becoming these approachable characters. Let's just remember that Mr. Shinzo Abe coming out from this green tube a la Mario, right? After the Rio Games for the Olympics, right? Or we have Mrs. Koike, the Tokyo governor, being dressed up as the Prince Chevalier. And we have from Quetzalcoatl, we have this progress there, Akai, and they transform this, and new publics absorb this, and they become related to it because it's fun, it's non-committal, and it's well done, and it's affordable at some point, because anime has become affordable in Mexico from, of course, legal ways. It was present in public television for very long, but it was always a shadow economy behind it. And nowadays it has become affordable, or video games the same. Okay, they have a very large creative economy behind. But how do we study this from international relations? When we go through this from international relations, we are coding it in cultural diplomacy, which is an integral part of the discipline of IR. And this discipline of IR is normally understood as this state and the way it interacts with other states. Especially this kind of approach to international affairs means by other means than war, okay? And diplomacy will then become a traditional, open, or secret diplomacy, because it does happen. And we will have behind that the public diplomacy. Public diplomacy is about hearing what the other country is doing and thinking about your own country, advocating for your country's position, political position, and understandings. And you will have the cultural diplomacy, which will mean then presenting your country with their culture, with all the honesty possible for it. That's how Mexico understands it, and we will see that in some examples later. But for the idea of cultural diplomacy, it's a little bit different than just hearing, advocating, or exchanging, for example, students, professors, specialists in different technology areas, or media, okay? Cultural diplomacy tends to be this direct communication between the foreign policy office in Mexico, or the secretariat, and publics around the world through their embassies. And normally the one of the embassies that has had the most attention from the Mexican government is, of course, the United States Mexican embassy, right? And in Washington, D.C. But also Tokyo embassy has a very long-lived office for cultural diplomacy. As a point of interest, I was doing some research there when I was just an undergraduate. So this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. And well, the themes that we go through here is, for example, then cultural diplomacy is very linked to the idea of soft power. Soft power, of course, is a little bit of a tricky concept in IR, because it will seem that it's a preferable thing against its antagonist, which will be the hard power. Hard power will be this capacity for coercion, for intimidation, for carrots and sticks, for making the other part in your counterpart in the international arena to do what you want by force. Okay, could be economical, military, etc. And soft power would be more like an attraction. Soft power will be very close to the idea of, I will attract what you want, I will make you want what I want, because this is nice. You want to see more Frida Kahlos. You want to have more mariachis coming. Maybe you have been paying attention, but a lot of countries have been showing their political leaders eating. It has become a trend. And food is also part of cultural diplomacy. Food diplomacy is part of, an integral part of normal, let's say, embassy, inside the embassy, or specific restaurants with special chefs, right? But food has become available for everyone to watch the recipes online. So suddenly we see Obama, for example, in his time going out to eat the United States food, or you see a Mexican ambassador eating with someone in the pictures. And food has also become part of this soft power because everybody now kind of know what a taco is, right? And Mexican food has become that kind of point of interest for the cultural diplomacy.
3 minutes.
Okay, so I'm gonna just go a little bit faster then. If the cultural diplomacy, it's working, it will help us construct a positive image of the other. And that will help us in the international arena, especially if you're talking to publics. If you're talking to publics, that will mean you will create sense of empathy. In Japanese, we'll call it the shitashimi. Shitashimi is very helpful for international policy setting, agenda setting in the local sphere, and then of course taking into the international sphere. It will create some understanding, but the key factor here is to understand the role of the agent. I have it here in red. I'm sorry for the Spanish in this graph. I didn't really know this until now. This is one of my research papers. I'm taking this. And the role of the agent, this cultural affairs attaché, normally in the embassy has a lot of power for presenting an image of Mexico or Japan, depending in which country. And the future for this can be seen a little bit from the past. In the past, I was doing on my research, the Revista Iberoamericana from the University of Sofia, or Yochi Daigaku, has a very, very in-depth research on media outlets. And I have seen that it's very, very low. The appearance of Mexico in official media is very, very low. So I only read, and they almost read nothing about Mexico, okay? The Japanese public rarely, very scarcely read anything positive or culturally related to Mexico. However, Japan has been very busy on cultural diplomacy. This is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs poll for the shitashimi, what I was telling you, from countries in Latin America, okay? They survey Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Trinidad, and Tobago. And you can see overwhelming positive results of how people in there see Japan as a very friendly or somewhat friendly nation, okay, for their countries. And I just want to make a note here that when the people ask them what they expect from Japan, 50% of them are actually expecting transfer of technology. So it's interesting. What is Mexico doing now? And with this, I'm gonna finish, okay? Mexico has a very now active cultural diplomacy through the internet. This video is just out for the Mexican celebrations for our Independence Day. It has a message from the ambassador Melba Priya, now in Tokyo. They have a YouTube channel. They have a, Vimeo channel. They have a Facebook account. They have also been very, very active with podcasts portraying the exchanges in Mexican culture and people living there. And the e-cultural diplomacy is going places happening right now. You can go and watch some short videos from Mexican cinema. Then it's very bold. And that's something from Mexican artist culture. The arts culture, and it comes directly into contrast with some of the Japanese more soft-hearted, Netflix-friendly kind of movies. If you go to this show, the Shorts Mexico, it's live in Vive Mexico Tokyo. You can just Google it. You will find at least 7 short movies that are very shocking and are very, very nice.
Hey, Chris.
Yes. So at the end of it all, Mexico is pushing for the e-cultural diplomacy in a way that COVID is making it possible to do. And that will be all.
Thank you, Dr. Collignon. It's 10:30 a.m. in Japan, 8:30 p.m. in Mexico. And I would like to thank all of the 5 participants for their exquisite presentations. I don't know, Ligia, if we have some time to pick up some questions, or do we have to close sharp?
No, if you want, we can have some.
Okay, there are some questions by the public. Most of them are for Professor Minohara, but I will just mention some of them. Naomi Jasmine.
How about if you pick out the questions that you think are relevant to each?
Uh-huh.
Well,
most of them are about Trump's Trump in the presidency of the U.S. or Biden, one or the other, and the relations that will there be any changes between U.S. and China, and the impact that the one or the other might have in Mexico. There's one question about China as a peaceful great power, and one other about the free atmosphere in the United States. She says, Nila Veronica Macias, would it be an opportunity for Asia to intervene in Mexico? There's a question for Melba Falk. Jose Antonio wants to know her insights on the energy sector. Okay, so broadly speaking, I would say this is, I would give, if you don't mind, about 1 minute to each of you, just to have closing remarks and to answer some of these questions that you can see at the bottom side of your screen. Go ahead, Tosh.
Okay, so I'll start off. Because I just have a minute, I'll keep it very, very brief, and I will also only reply to the one question about America's China policy under either Biden or Trump. In the Japanese conservative press, it is said that it's written that Biden will be soft on China. I just don't see that. Perhaps in the past, Biden's approach to China was much more lenient, but I think in the present climate, being pro-China is suicidal if you're a politician. American public opinion has shifted so much towards taking a hard line against China, and so he won't do it. And so in this regard, I think there is no major difference between Biden and Trump, although looking at the advisors, the foreign policy advisors to Biden, it seems to be that they believe that they can work on China on a case-by-case issue. So they'll push back on issues such as human rights and whatnot, yet will try to attempt to work with China on such issues as global climate, global climate change, stuff like that, which the Trump administration will not do. And so this, I think, will ultimately fail. It will pursue it and it won't work. Because if you're going to draw a line, it has to be a line in which you don't go back and forth over certain issues. With Trump, even though he appears vehemently anti-China, it's because of the elections. And I think deep down, China respects Xi Jinping because he loves dictators. And he would want to strike a deal. All right. So in that regard, that's the real hypocrisy about Trump, that he's really not anti anything except for maybe anti Democrats and anti, the radical lefts, as he calls it. The one final thing is that Biden will appreciate alliances. And so for Japan, Korea, a Biden administration would be much easier to work with. And looking at the personality of the current, the new prime minister, Suga, I don't think Suga can work with Trump. It's just impossible. So in that regard, Biden is good too. For Mexico, I think this is a no-brainer. I mean, I don't think Trump appreciates Mexicans. I think in general, Trump looks down on people with color. And so with Biden, this wall will stop, and the immigration policy will become one that's much more reasonable and much more practical. So for those reasons, I think that Biden, although far from perfect, will lead to a better world. Thank you.
Thank you. Melba, do you want to answer the question? You have 1 minute for closing remarks. Melba?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the question about the investment in energy from Japan. I haven't followed that sector in particular. Maybe Mr. Kono could say something about it. I know Japan has interest in investment in energy sector, but I have not followed that sector in my research.
Okay. Do you want to say something, Mr. Kono?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. And also, Japanese company also invested a lot for the renewable energy in Mexico, like solar and also wind generation. That are very competitive and also good for the environment. But at the same time, in Mexican government, just to changing for the energy reform, so that creating more concern in the future. Existing or future program is maintain or decrease. And then we hoping really good to compromise on that new policy and also existing project and the future. Thank you. And also, thank you very much for that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hayashi, do you want to close your participation with some remarks?
No, thank you very much for this opportunity. I forgot to say thank you very much, Melba Sensei, Victor Sensei, Chris Sensei. I think this is a very great opportunity for us also. So it's very difficult to know about Mexico from Japan. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Well, there's a couple of questions by Elliot Gomez and Diana Perez. They are raised for Professor Collignon. Perhaps you can read them. It's a bit long to read them.
Yes, but the difference between Japan and Mexico in the actions of cultural diplomacy in Mexico will be enough to get closer. Okay, I'm not sure if there is a line that we can say enough. These kind of topics are not that positive in order to have like a clear line, but we can measure that this could be useful for creating, as Professor Hayashi is saying, there is not much access to knowledge about Mexico in Japanese traditional media, for example, from TV or even some video games, right? And doing at least something like what the embassy is pushing right now with the e-cultural diplomacy approach, with this accessibility from your living room, makes it very, very useful. Okay, the interesting part will be if they like it, because as I mentioned, the topics are very bold. In that short cinema, some of the topics are directly confrontative of more traditional values in Japan. So that is also honest communication between countries. Okay, what we think and how we are different, but somehow we are close. And from Diana, do you think that this e-cultural diplomacy and cultural transfer through popular culture will transform the first impression of Octavio Paz? Yes, I think it's happening. This is entrenchment or puzzlement. The puzzlement we discussed before is fading. Now we feel closer to Japan. And I noticed that because now I have 40-something students in Japanese language course 1. Okay, so there's a lot of interest of people getting into Japanese. And or this is reproduce ideas or images. Yes, definitely. If we only manage to present ideas filtered through the glasses of Disney, Pixar, or video games, there will be the same images that will be based on stereotypes. And that's why this short festival strike me as a very important deal. Please do watch it if you can.
Okay, I want to thank you all for your participation in this webinar. I'm sure that there are many questions to be raised in the near future, especially after the elections in the United States. I'm sure that everybody has the focus on what's going to happen there, what would be the future of the world, and Mexico particularly. I was wondering when I heard Dr. Collignon speaking about the cultural diplomacy, what would be his priorities if he were assigned as a cultural attaché to the Mexican embassy in Tokyo? That could be interesting to know. But anyway, that's just for yourself. Thank you very much, Ligia. Also, thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
See
Thank
you next time. Thank you, Tosh. Thank you, Ayasan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
Melba.
ありがとうございました。
very much.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you.
Adios.
Adios.